Disclaimer, I am not a licensed medical professional. This podcast is not intended to replace real medical support from a mental health professional or other licensed medical practitioner. If you are in crisis and need immediate support, call 911 or reach out to Suicide Prevention Hotline at 988.
Hello and welcome to Dare to Talk, where we strive to bring some positivity to your day. I'm Dare. Let's talk. Before we get into this episode, I'm going to invite you to take a mindful moment with me. This mindful moment, if you've been with me in previous episodes, is going to be a little bit different from that. In this mindful moment, I'm going to encourage you to find a laying position, laying flat on your back, or a comfortable seated position. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. And I'm going to invite you to put a hand on your chest and a hand on your stomach or your abdomen. We are going to be taking 5 deep breaths in through our nose and out through our mouths. And we are going to be focusing on feeling that hand on our abdomen rising while keeping the hand on our chest relatively still, relatively flat. You ready? Let's begin. Breathe in. And out. 1. Breathe in. And out. 2. Breathe in. And out. 3. Breathe in. And out. 4. Breathe in. And out. 5. All right, you can open your eyes. Thank you for joining me in these mindful breathing moments. I really enjoy these mindful moments first thing to start off an episode because I personally get a little bit of anxiety and go into a little bit of fight or flight whenever I'm trying to record these episodes. It's a form of public speaking and it can be a little nerve-wracking sometimes. So having a moment to practice the mindful breathing before coming into the episodes for me is really beneficial. And I hope that they're beneficial for you guys as well when you're going about your day, because you're getting a moment to take some deep breaths and recenter, refocus yourselves. And on that note, today we are going to discuss breathing and how breathing is related to our 5 F's, our flight, fight, freeze, flop, and fawn responses. So breathing is really, really important for these responses. I've touched on that a little bit in previous episodes when talking about flight, fight, or freeze, when talking about stress management and how our breathing is really, really core to that. And one of the things that you're going to hear from a lot of people in the field of psychology, from a lot of people who are teaching and dealing with behavioral management, lots of people who are in moments where we're dealing with people who may be in fight, flight, or freeze, one of the first things that you're going to hear is, okay, let's breathe. Let's take some breaths. And that comes down to what we're talking about today, which is why our breathing is so important, particularly when it is related to stress management and our 5 F's. In order to understand that a little bit, I get to talk more about one of my favorite pieces of anatomy in our body, which is our brains. Our brains run this meat machine that is our body. They keep us alive. They keep us going. They keep us functioning. And they do that through a autonomic nervous system in part. So when I'm thinking of autonomic, I'm thinking automatic because that's what this nervous system is. It's something that is done that we don't have to put a lot of conscious effort or a conscious thought into. Our brains just trigger our body to do it automatically. And it is things like our heartbeat, our digestion, our waste removal system, when we are sweating for temperature control. And a lot of times, even our breathing is part of our autonomic nervous system. And our autonomic nervous system is split into two. It's split into our sympathetic nervous system, which is what kicks in when we're going into flight, fight, or freeze, and our parasympathetic nervous system, our PSNS, parasympathetic nervous system, which is what is kicked in and going on when we are in times of relative calm or normalcy. One of the things that is shared between both parasympathetic nervous system and sympathetic nervous system is our breathing. And while breathing is part of our autonomic nervous system, it's something that happens automatically. We don't think very frequently about breathing. It is one of the few things, if not the only thing, in our autonomic nervous system that we actually do have full control over. We can't just think consciously about our heart beating, make our heart beat slow, and make our heartbeat speed up. We can't think automatically about our digestion and control whether or not our body is going to digest the food that we have in our system. We can't think about sweating or stopping sweating and making our body stop sweating. But we can think about our breathing and take control of our breath. And our breath plays into both the fight and flight system, our sympathetic system, and our parasympathetic system. And that is why we go to breathing so automatically when we are trying to help people re engage that parasympathetic system. And when we're trying to get that fight or flight or freeze response, those 5 F's, to calm down so we can think a little bit more reasonably and have a little bit more control over how our body is reacting. It all comes down to breath. There are a lot of different things that happen when we go into fight, flight, or freeze, when we go into those 5 F's. And one of the first things that happens is we might feel our breath speed up. We might amp up our breathing a little bit. And you can tell if you are doing breath control and you start purposely speeding up your breath, you're going to feel that your heart rate is going to elevate and that other things might kick in and that you might start feeling a feeling of anxiety or anxiousness. You might start thinking, oh, hey, maybe my body does need to go into flight, fight, or freeze, even though I didn't see danger right away. And it can trick your body into doing that. The same is true if you slow your breathing down. When we take a moment to breathe mindfully and to calm our breathing down, then our nervous system is also going to calm down. Our heart rate is going to calm. Our blood pressure is going to lower. Our other parts of our parasympathetic system are going to start kicking back in, and we'll be able to re-engage that higher thinking that sometimes gets kicked off if we go into our 5 F's. Part of why the examples that we see whenever we're talking about calming down our breathing is after we've just finished running and our breath is really elevated, or after we've exercised. One of the first things that athletes are going to try to do is calm that breathing down, try to calm that heart rate down through calming that breathing down. If we are in a moment where we're having a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, we're calling people to help us with that fear or anxiety. One of the first things that people are going to tell us to do is, okay, let's take a few deep breaths. Let's calm down. Let's breathe. When you are going through school and you have teachers that you're dealing with and you are in a moment where you're crying or you're stressed out or you're in a small time of crises, your teachers are going to say, hey, okay, let's breathe. And this is why. It is because that parasympathetic nervous system gets re-engaged when our breathing is calmed down. So, breath and control and breathing is really vitally important. And it's not just important to practice breath control and breathing when we are in moments of stress or when we feel like we're going into fight, fight, or freeze. It's important that we are practicing breath control and mindful breathing quite frequently and quite regularly. And part of the reason for that is because if we're already in fight, fight, or freeze, it's going to be harder for us to engage something that we don't have a lot of practice with. Our body is going off of its natural instincts at that point to try to protect us, to try to keep us safe. But if we already have our breathing as something that we do regularly, then we're not trying to learn a new skill. It's something that becomes almost automatic. I feel my breath amping up. Now I'm going to take a moment to try to calm that breath down. I did a lot of practice with this with my students back at elementary schools when I was teaching in special education. Part of what we did every single day was we practiced breathing techniques that were going to be beneficial for them if we were in a moment when we had to go into behavioral management or crises management. During our circle time, we would go through things like what is today's date? What is the calendar? What are our goals for today? And mixed in with that, we would practice a mindful breathing technique throughout the week. And it was the same mindful breathing technique all week long. And then we would visit it every so often throughout the rest of the school year or throughout different times during the day. We actually did mindful breathing a couple of times in the day. It wasn't just in morning circle time, but it was also when we were first coming back from lunch. We were amped up, we were excited, we had our lunch break, we had our recess, we were excited and we wanted to go and do things, but let's take a moment and calm everything down really quickly. Take a mindful moment, do a meditation, do some mindful breathing practices. So, mindful breathing was something that I really brought in very frequently for my students, used very frequently with them. And I saw a lot of really, really good improvements with that. Whenever I would have a student who would be going into crises or a student that I was having to do behavioral management with, one of the first things that I could call on was the breathing techniques that we'd practiced. I'd be paying attention to what breathing techniques my students really, really vibed with, what's breathing techniques they got really excited about doing and what breathing techniques they could do with a lot of success, and would say, okay, hey, this student is going into this moment. I know they really like this mindful breathing exercise. Let's call on that. Let's bring that up and ask them to do that with us really quickly. And they would, because it was something that was familiar to them, something that wasn't new or abstract. It was something that was a part of routine. And so they would do the breathing exercise. And oftentimes I would see calm happen after that. For myself, that is also true. If I'm practicing mindful breathing techniques quite frequently, and I know that there are some mindful breathing techniques that I vibe with really, really well, and I practice those mindful breathing techniques very frequently, then whenever I myself am getting kicked into fight, flight, or freeze, I will call on those breathing exercises that I do more frequently and that I have more experience with, and that makes the response more automatic. So it's important that we're practicing our breathing techniques frequently and that we're figuring out what breathing techniques really work for us and having those on hand, especially for my people who have mental health illnesses that might cause anxiety or who might have a harder time getting through the day without engaging in fight, flight, or freeze behaviors or in that kind of response of anxiety and fear and needing to get away. If we have regular practice of breathing techniques, we know what we like to do. If we've practiced them regularly, it's going to be easier for us to draw on that breathing.
It is time for a terrible dare joke. What did the green grape say to the purple grape? Breathe, man. Just breathe. Eh, eh. No. Okay. If you have jokes that you want to have considered for Terrible Dare jokes, leave them in the comments or email me at dare2talk@gmail.com. It'll be listed in the description. Join us on the next episode for another Terrible Dare joke.
So let's get into some breathing techniques that we might be able to use. First and foremost, let's talk about diaphragmatic breathing, breathing with our diaphragm. So, our diaphragm is this muscle or this membrane that goes around our core and kind of supports our lungs, supports our breathing. If anybody has had any experience in choir or singing or even in band that involves a lot of breath control, you're going to be very familiar with diaphragmatic breathing. Breathing with your diaphragm, also called belly breathing, breathing with your belly. When we are doing diaphragmatic breathing, we are drawing our air deep into our belly cavity, deep down into our lungs. We are getting in as much air as we can possibly get. And that's where we're going to see our bellies rising if we're laying flat on our backs or if we're sitting in that comfortable position. And we're going to have our hand on our stomach and our hand on our chest. We're going to feel that diaphragmatic breathing in our bellies. Our bellies are going to rise. If I am working with smaller children or people who maybe are a little bit more interested in activities if they're made a little bit more fun, one of the things that I do to help see if my students are engaging in diaphragmatic breathing is I'll have them lay flat on their back and we'll put a stuffed animal or a rubber ducky on their bellies. And when we see that rubber ducky rising or that stuffed animal rising, we know that they are breathing through their bellies. They're engaging in that diaphragmatic breathing. That breath is coming where we want it to come. If the ducky's sitting on the belly isn't rising, but the chest is rising, then we're seeing chest breathing. And chest breathing is usually more shallow than diaphragmatic breathing. And we'll often see a lot of chest breathing when we are in panicked breath or our 5 Fs, or if we're panting or don't have a whole lot of control over our breathing. We'll see it happening in our chest, not so much in our bellies. So we want to make sure that our bellies are engaged, that we are getting that good deep belly breath, that diaphragmatic breathing. And one of the most natural ways to practice that is actually by laying on your back. When you are laying on your back, if you are in a comfortable position, if you don't have a lot of back pain, if you are capable of laying on your back and it not putting a lot of stress on your body, our bodies naturally feel that laying position as a position of rest, and it's going to want to engage more naturally in diaphragmatic breathing. And so our bellies are going to more naturally want to rise with the air. We're going to see it a lot more, which is why when we were doing diaphragmatic breathing during choir practice a lot, we'd lay flat on our backs with the rubber duckies or with the stuffed animals, or our hands on our bellies and our chest. And that's why whenever I would do these practices with my younger students, we would lay on our backs. When we are practicing diaphragmatic breathing, we also do a lot of breathing through our nose and out through our mouths. But, like stated before, when we were doing our mindful breathing techniques, when we have sinus problems or infections or other things that prevent us from feeling like we're getting enough air in through our nose, that can actually cause more problems than it does help. So, if you are having those kinds of issues, breathing through your mouth isn't terrible. It's not the worst thing ever to do. It just is more natural to breathe in through our noses than out our mouths. And I need to do a little bit more research potentially on why that is the case. But that is generally speaking the best practice and what people constantly are recommending: breathing in through your nose, breathing out through your mouth. So that is something that you're going to hear said a lot when it comes to diaphragmatic breathing and for other breathing techniques: breathing in through your nose, breathing out through your mouth. One of the other things that is going to come down with diaphragmatic breathing is making sure that you're not just pushing out your belly with your muscles, but that your belly is actually rising because you are drawing that breath in deeply. And I see that sometimes with some of my students, younger students, whenever we're trying to do those breathing techniques, they're going to just push their bellies up and try to make their bellies look all big, and that's not really diaphragmatic breathing. That's just, I'm going to play with my belly and make it rise up and down really fast and see what I can do. So we want to really make sure that we are getting our belly to rise because we are breathing with our diaphragm, breathing with our bellies. Diaphragmatic breathing is something that's going to happen through most of the breathing exercises that we have. It's a good practice to just try to breathe with our diaphragm at regular intervals throughout the day and make sure that we're getting in those deep breaths with our diaphragm, not just with our chest, through regular practice of diaphragmatic breathing. And there's different ways that we can see diaphragmatic breathing being used. People who meditate a lot, when we're doing meditations, we're doing diaphragmatic breathing. When we are doing mindful rested moments where we're taking a moment for ourselves, just closing our eyes, feeling nature around us, if we're in a calm and relaxed space, we might be doing diaphragmatic breathing. And a lot of other breathing exercises that are done to help re-engage the parasympathetic nervous system are done through with the aid of diaphragmatic breathing and other tools, visual aids, or cues that help mark when we should breathe and when we should not breathe. So, one tool and breathing exercise that I did rather frequently with students and that I do rather frequently with myself and that I have heard of quite often is called box breathing. So, it's using our diaphragmatic breathing, and it's doing a specific kind of breathing pattern of breathing in through our nose, holding our breath, not breathing out, not breathing in, just holding for a set amount of time, breathing out, and then before we breathe in, holding again for a set amount of time. And so it's really conscious time lapses between those breaths. And the typical time that I see is about 4 to 6 seconds. So 4 seconds or 6 seconds breathing in, 4 to 6 seconds holding, 4 to 6 seconds breathing out, 4 to 6 seconds holding. And it's done in that pattern, and it's often drawn out in the shape of a square. And it will have like arrows and breathing prompts around it. And that's really good to use if you're somebody who likes to trace things or have a tactile kind of feel as you're doing breaths. If you have small children who are a little bit more tactile, having that drawn out as that visual cue, and really focusing on being mindful with those times. So let's take a moment really quickly to practice that. We're going to practice some box breathing, and I'm going to encourage you to try to draw it out to about 6 seconds. I'm going to try to do 6 seconds. So I am going to make sure that I'm breathing with my diaphragm by putting a hand on my chest and putting a hand on my abdomen. I'm going to breathe in for 6 seconds. I'm going to hold for 6 seconds, breathe out for 6 seconds, hold for 6 seconds. And I'm going to repeat this 3 times. I'm encouraging you guys to do this with hand on my chest, hand here, and let's breathe in. Hold. Out. Hold. In. Hold. Out. In, hold, out, hold. And you can breathe normally again. That is an example of box breathing. You're breathing in, holding, out, holding, in, holding, out, holding. And it's really calming that breathing down, engaging that parasympathetic nervous system, and making sure that we can kind of help kick out of the five F's, re engaging with our higher level of thinking, calming ourselves down, and letting us process whatever it is that's happening. For people who are more movement based or more visual with like body movements, another exercise that I have done rather frequently to teach that diaphragmatic breathing, but also to show breathing in through our nose and out through our mouths, is this idea of smelling a flower and blowing out a candle. And this works really well if we're working with smaller children. We're smelling our flower. And so I use a finger oftentimes, and I'll bring the finger up to my nose, or I'll make a little kind of hand motion that kind of shows that I'm holding a flower. And I'll hold it up to my nose and I'll breathe in through my nose. And I'll breathe in for about 6 seconds. And then I'll move the finger like it's a candle down to my mouth, like a birthday candle or something like that. And you breathe out to try to blow out the candle for 6 seconds. And so we do that back and forth a few times to practice smelling our flower, blowing out our candle, smelling our flower, blowing out our candle, and practicing getting that breath in. So let's do that a couple of times. So get your flower ready, whether it's just a pointed finger or cluster fingers, part of your fist, something that you're holding to flower, and then one index finger pointed up is your candle. And we're going to start with our flower up at our nose. We're going to breathe in for 6 seconds and then breathe out through our mouth for 6 seconds. Ready? Smell our flower. Blow out our candle. Smell our flower. Blow out our candle. Smell our flower. Blow out our candle. There are lots of really cute videos that can go with these different breathing exercises. And I really like finding the cute videos on YouTube and stuff. And there are lots and lots and lots of other cute things that can help, especially if we're working with younger children for breathing exercises, and more adult things that can help us on YouTube and throughout the internet find other good breathing exercises. But one thing almost all of the breathing exercises have in common is that we are using our diaphragmatic breathing, that we are really mindful on that breath, pulling it down into our bellies, making that breath deep, making it calm, making it very purposeful. It is breathing with a purpose. And the purpose is to re engage that parasympathetic nervous system, to kick us out of our five F's so that we can better deal with whatever it is that's stressing us out in the moment and engage with our high level thinking and stress management skills. On that note, thank you for joining me with Dare to Talk. I am going to ask you to like and subscribe if you found this video to be helpful, if you really like it. And please leave in the comments breathing exercises that you have done, times in which you have felt that engaging with your breathing was beneficial to you, times in which you wish you had listened and just breathed for a moment. Maybe some of the breathing exercises that you've done with students, with kids, with other adults who have maybe needed to practice in breathing exercises. And if you have anything that you really want to see in my mindful moments in the morning, let me know. Put those in the comments or email me at dare@daretotalk.blog. Thank you again for joining me in this episode of Dare to Talk. I dare you to talk about how you're really feeling today.